Recipes are appearing in all sorts of newspapers all over the place. We're about to speak to William Sitwell, the Daily Telegraph's food critic. We'll get his idea of how we've moved from Coronation chicken, which is what the Queen supplied back when she was crowned, up to now, 2023, where we're having to eat quiche. Let them eat quiche. There was a time when they said real men don't eat quiche, but of course that's all changed now, and you can eat quiche even if you are a real man, and even if you're not a real man, or even if you're a real woman, or not a real woman, or even a non-binary individual. Let's find out from William Sitwell what he makes of it all. William, a very good afternoon to you.
Hi, Mike. Hello.
Very nice to see you. Does this tell us anything about the change of culture in Britain, that we've gone from Coronation chicken to a rather kind of green-looking quiche, which apparently has broad beans, tarragon, and some spinach in it?
I think it reflects the wisdom, the common sense approach of the king and his queen consort in not trying to, be too challenging, right, not try to be too disruptive. I mean, the thing is, Coronation chicken was an extraordinary dish. It was a dish that reflected the sort of constant merging traditions of India, British cuisine, and it was a piece of luck that Constance Spry invented this dish that has then become so important and so useful at summer events and weddings and so on. I think to try and replicate something, to try and be as ambitious as that would be very difficult. You remember the Platinum Jubilee trifle of last year or so, which was a rather sort of sweet concoction that we were a bit too complicated to make, and I personally thought it was far too sugary.
Yes.
This is a really good, sensible idea. It's not groundbreaking. What I think is great is it uses broad beans, one of the most revolting of vegetables. Whether or not the king suggests that you peel them, maybe he does, in which case you should certainly try and get someone to peel them for you. I'm sure that the king would have his own broad bean peeler,
of course,
in attendance. It's a good use of broad beans, as is things like broad bean hummus. So it's just it's a very sensible suggestion. It's just basically saying, why don't you do a quiche? And the fact is that most people are probably doing quiches anyway. And as you say, quiches are wonderful things. I mean, most people buy a quiche, but actually, when you triumph, when you manage to set custard in pastry, it hasn't got a soggy bottom. It's as great a challenge and a triumph to a man as the birth of a newborn child.
Yes.
So I think it's a fantastic thing. We can be proud of it. And I think that the king should be encouraging more men to show their manliness, to show how sensible they are these days by making quiches.
by not only eating it, but actually making it. Because I consider myself a reasonable cook, but I've never actually made a quiche. And as you say, the fear is that it would be soggy if you didn't get it right.
I have made about one quiche in my life. I made a rectangular quiche, and I put strips of freshly cut asparagus across it. And I have to say it was one of the greatest achievements of my life.
Wow. Well, I may give it a go. See, I was saying this morning that I would quite like to add in something like Parma ham, which I know is not very British, or possibly even some British ham, because it would give it a certain flavour. Because if I do ever eat quiche, it tends to have something like that in it.
Yeah, I think that, the quiche should be, a dish that you can put stuff alongside. I mean, I think we should approach these things in the same way that the Spanish do. If you go to a good Spanish bar and order a plate of tomatoes, it comes covered in ham. So I think that we should embrace this and serve huge, great chunks of meat alongside it.
Yes.
So it's a crowd pleaser, because it'll keep, if you want to use non-dairy to try and set your custard, actually I don't advise that. If you're a vegetarian, then this will keep you happy. If you're a meat eater and you're producing this alongside a whole array of beautifully grilled, pink in the center lamb chops, and it's a winner. But it's a beautiful thing. It's a great dish for sharing. It's a transportable dish. It's a dish you can take outdoors. So it reflects the common sense, non-controversial attitude of our monarch.
And is there any sort of advice on whether it should be served hot or cold or lukewarm? Does it matter?
I like personally a quiche to be served sort of lukewarm. The idea of if you've got one, you bring it out of the Aga and it remains slightly warm on the top of the Aga, but otherwise it's perfectly decent cold. So I quite like to reheat a quiche just to give it a bit more life. But otherwise, it's quite good. You know, you can almost hold it like a canapé, you know, so you can hold your glass of English sparkling wine, your glass of Sussex.
Don't mention the Sussexes.
Well, unfortunately, Sussex produces some of the greatest.
It does.
The greatest use of the name Sussex is in relation to the wines of wineries like Rathfinney in Sussex, who, I mean, but that's a whole other issue. You know, they've got they're trying to work out what to call their wines. Right. Calling it Sussex would have been a great idea until some other people rather ruined the idea of that brand.
Well, that is the problem.
A glass of fizzy Sussex with a big wedge of quiche. You know.
Very good. And what about if you are a vegetarian? Presumably you can't have the recipe that includes the 25 grams of lard in the pastry. But I used to make a lot of pastry. I don't know whether you can substitute that successfully. Can you?
I think you can substitute it with butter.
Right.
So you know, lard is quite an old school dish. I think the idea of using lard. I mean, I think lard is one of the most beautiful things on the planet.
Yeah.
Lard on toast with a gherkin. Is a fantastic thing. It really whets the appetite for a glass of sherry.
My mother always had lard in the fridge.
Yeah. Well, a lot of our mothers used to. Very few of us now, you know, trap the drippings from the beef in the oven. We just shove it down the drain to create fatbergs in our sewers.
Yes. It is a shame. And so, as far as the sort of the general well-being of the country is concerned, do you think this will encourage a sort of a run on quiches, that people will suddenly start making them all over the place?
I slightly feel it'll make absolutely no difference at all.
How disappointing.
I think if the big suggestion is to do a quiche, most people are probably thinking, well, I was probably going to bring a quiche along anyway.
Right.
I would love to think that it's going to create a run on pre-made pastry. Wouldn't that be a wonderful symbol of
pre-made pastry is a great thing. I very rarely waste my time now actually making it from scratch.
I wouldn't suggest anyone out there if they haven't made pastry, to try and make pastry on the morning of the King's coronation, because it'll completely sour your day. Because if it's the first time, grown men as fundamentally magnificent as yourself will be in tears, and that's not the way you want to start May the 6th.
It's very true. Now, your piece in the Telegraph today we must touch upon as well, because you've, like me, you've become slightly irritable about things like QR codes and online bookings. And the thing that really annoys me at the moment is when you get people telling you that you've made a booking, but you'll have to, relieve the table and give it back an hour and a half later before you've even got there.
Listen, there are so many things that seem to conspire to irritate one about hospitality, which is unusual given the fact that the word is hospitality.
Yeah.
And basically, every touch point of a restaurant or a hotel booking should make you feel great about the brand.
Right.
So if you can't telephone to discuss your booking, it irks me. If you then are in the restaurant, you can't peruse a menu without looking at your phone and connecting a QR to the website.
Yeah.
If you can't then order food without using website, and if then you're not allowed to do things like pour your own wine, and you're given a restriction as to when you need to leave this godforsaken place.
Right.
It is quite testing. I understand restaurants that need to turn tables. I think that normally they'll tell you in advance, and it's the sort of place that you can stuff yourself with 3 to 4 courses within an hour and a half.
Yes.
So I think if you turn up and they tell you that you need to get your backside out of there in an hour and a half, that would be quite annoying. But what I do find, the worst thing is central reservation systems for hotels. So I made the mistake of trying to phone a very decent brand of hotel called the Hotel du Vin in Henley the other day.
Yes.
God forbid, of course there's not a phone number. You end up ringing a central reservation number. And when you say you want to speak to reception, they think you're kind of half mad.
Right.
They think there's something wrong with you. And then by the time you actually get through to them, you have gone mad, because they answer the telephone and you've lost all sense of diplomacy and you just erupt.
Yeah.
And so you become mad. So it's a sort of self-fulfilling.
And then you
prophecy.
just don't want to have anything to do with them, do you? I mean, I have that in restaurants. My sort of patience runs out now more frequently than it used to. You know, and if you're waiting more than you need to be waiting for somebody to come and talk to you or bring you something or even ask if you want another drink since your glass has been empty for 10 minutes, all of that drives you insane.
Yeah, and it all points to the fact that service is as important and sometimes more important than food. I think that great service can sometimes rescue a restaurant that has moderate food.
Yeah, totally.
But a place with great food is destroyed by arrogant, tedious, and lazy service. Yeah. I think that we really need to persuade people that, you know, the hospitality industry is a fantastic one to go into, and service is a very noble profession, looking after people, caring for people, and going up the hierarchy towards management of a restaurant is a fantastic career. So, but I'm with you on this. I think that we need to ban a lot of these digital elements. I mean, there is a bar restaurant in Bristol Airport where you can only order a drink if you do it online, in spite of the fact there are people at the bar.
Yes.
So you find yourself in this sort of demonic situation where you're absolutely dying for a drink, but your principles forbid you from doing so. It's a complete nightmare.
It is. I'll leave you with one thought. I boycotted, in fact, a restaurant in Borough Market, which I'm not going to name, on the grounds that they couldn't make me a medium hamburger one day for lunch because apparently Southwark Council said it had to be medium well.
That's right. It could have killed you.
It could have done. But
you know, the danger zones, the dangerous things that can happen to us when we step foot into a restaurant whose job it is to serve us food and not kill us.
Yes.
Thank God that we're preserved from that.
Yes, absolutely right. William, great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. William Sitwell, Telegraph's food critic, on the news that the Coronation quiche is a thing, and you should definitely try and make one. But don't try and make the pastry because you'll screw it up. This is talkTV.